Hello everyone and welcome to my shop. This bench is far from complete, but at least I can show it to you all put together. I'm really happy with this. I think it's going to be just a great addition to the shop. I think it's going to be everything I wanted it to be. A few points on the last video. Sometimes I sit down to edit a video anticipating doing a voiceover and fully explaining everything, and then I just kind of get lazy and just show the build without any voiceover. That is a lot easier. It takes less time. But I think on the last one, some things were not so clear. Some people had questions. I just want to touch on a few points from the last video before I get started on today's build. So one of the questions that I got a few times was regarding these pipes that join the legs and the whole inner pipe assembly that lets me still fill these with sand. I don't have a metal lathe, so I had them on my wood lathe and I was using a grinder to change the dimensions. And somebody asked, why didn't I just buy a pipe that fit into each other so I just weld it up and don't have to do all that? And the answer is that I thought I was doing that. When I purchased it, it looked like the inner and outer dimensions or diameters were going to match up so that I could just put it all together and not do any of that grinding. But when I got it, the actual dimensions were different than the stated specifications for that pipe. I am quoting this base to see how much it would cost to have somebody fabricate it so I could potentially sell it. And I'm going to get all that corrected so that I'm not paying for a bunch of lathe work. That would just run the price up unnecessarily. So I did learn from that. The only thing that I couldn't do in my shop that I didn't show was these countersinks. I looked at a countersink bit to make these large countersinks, and all the shafts on those countersinks were larger than what could fit in my drill press. So I had to take this to a machine shop and get those made. I really didn't want smaller bolts. I wanted this to look and feel and be very beefy and strong, and having these full, this is a 1-inch threaded bolt, and the diameter here is about 2-inch. I didn't want to go any smaller than that. So with those points covered, here are all the build steps to get from the end of last video to the current state, minus the vise. I'll talk about the vise at the end. So I started by making the recesses on the bottom of each side that the metal base would fit into. And I ganged them up and used a router to route 2 grooves to define the edges to get nice crisp edges, and then took the center out with a chisel. Then the sides were similar. I just used the fence on the router to cut those recesses. And I used a chisel to clean things up and square off the edges. Now this corner here was going to be in the way of my welds, so I sawed and then chiseled it out. Nobody's ever going to see this, so it doesn't have to be very nice looking. And now it's time to fit the legs in place. Now, my rookie welding abilities bit me a bit here because I wasn't very careful about how the metal would move and contract after welding. So there are a couple of these that just wouldn't go into place. And I don't show this, but I actually had to go back and grind out some of the welds, hammer them in place, re-weld them, just to get everything to fit. So this was a bit of a process. I could do it a lot faster if I was to do it again, but that's life, and it worked out. Now the base is attached to the top with threaded bolts, so I'm going to tap threads into
the top with the Wood Whisperer thread taps, which are now exclusively sold by MLCS. And if you want to purchase them while they're still Wood Whisperer thread taps, you better do it now, because after MLCS uses up the inventory that they bought from Mark, it's going to be rebranded. The taps will be the same, same high quality. It'll just be rebranded. And these taps are really ideal for a project like this where you want a strong hold, because they're just ever so slightly smaller diameter than metal taps, so you get a good compression fit. And threading this bolt in, I actually used a pipe to extend the Allen key just to get it really tight, and I didn't tear those threads out, so they're really strong. Now I tighten up the bolts that hold the front and back halves of the bench together. And I took this photo to show how the bench is very stable, and everyone on Instagram thought it was photoshopped, which means you're overestimating my photo editing ability. I'm using some adhesive back dense rubber pads for the feet of the bench. This is just to help even out any uneven surfaces on the concrete floor, vibration dampening, and that sort of thing. And this is the main reason why I filled those feet of the bench with Bondo. Now for the challenge of trying to get the thing right side up again. I had to use a little bit of physics. Brute force was not working for me. So that's all the interesting details so far, except
the vise. I'm not ready to reveal exactly what and how this vise is, how it works. And that's because it's going very well. This is a shop prototype, so there are some things I'm going to change for the final design, but I think it's very likely that I'll be able to kickstart this, offer it for sale. So I'm very hopeful. It's working really well. And I want to kind of save the full reveal of the vise for the point where I actually have that kickstart going. I just think the launch will be more successful that way. But I can tell you that looking at it from the outside, what you might think is that I have one central screw down the middle and then kind of some supports. That's not what this vise is. This is a twin screw vise. It has fast travel capability. It does everything that my last conception of the vise was doing, except I think it does it in a more elegant way. Certainly is performing better. I'm not having all the jamming problems and issues I had with the other one. I'm still getting some quotes in and putting together the final details on the design, but it's not too far away from launching. So like I said at the beginning, there's lots more to be done on this bench. The first thing I'm going to do is take it all back apart again, sand down all the crusty mill slag and get the metal parts looking nice, finished, protected. I've got to do the dog holes and the whole magnet deal on the top of the bench, build the dogs into the vise and some other kind of fiddly stuff before this bench is done. So it's by no means finished. But before I get into all that, I think I'm just going to leave it like this for a couple weeks because it's to the point where I can actually work on it, and that's fun. So I'm going to take a little break and work on some other things, mainly the vise. That's my highest priority right now. So hope you enjoyed this. Some people have asked for plans for this bench. I think I am going to offer plans. It's a little tricky because The equipment and skill set to build the base is a lot different than, you know, with the welding and machine working and like the big countersink, for example. I didn't even have the capability to do that. It's a little bit of a hard thing to build. What I am curious to hear from, though, is do you like the design? Is it something you'd want in your shop? And what would you pay for the metal base? Now, I think the sales pitch for the metal base would be it's an easier fabrication. All you need to do, if you could purchase the legs finished, not have to do any of that, all you do is glue up the top, cut the recesses for the base, and bolt it together, and then you have the finished workbench, you know, after you do the dog holes and stuff. And if you ever want to change woods, like you could start with pine and then upgrade to something else, or if you wear a top out, you still have the base, you don't have to build a whole new bench. The legs could really be with you for the life of your woodworking endeavors, even if you change the top out several times. So that's the sales pitch. What do you think you would pay for, or would you pay anything for the base? What do you think would be a reasonable price point for the base? I'd be just curious to hear what people think about that. I think that's about it. Oh, stability. One of the biggest concerns people have had about this bench is because I narrowed up the legs a little bit, which provided several other advantages for the design. Does that make the bench too wobbly? And the answer I've been giving is I'm going to fill the legs up with sand. That'll lower the center of gravity, give it a lot of weight. It won't be tippy. I have not added the sand yet, and I can tell you I don't need. I'm still going to add the sand, but I don't need to. I mean, I can tip it over if I tried, but it takes a really good shove. If I'm hand planing and hit a knot, this bench is not going to tip. It's not going to move, even without the sand. The sand will make it even better. So, not a concern. It's good. But we can stop worrying about the tipping bench. I think that's everything for today. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.